do, while our speakers have a chance to go ahead and eat a little bit, I'm going to introduce them, and then they will come up and share with us one at a time. But I'm going to introduce both of you now, because that way I don't need to come back up here, and you, like I said, will have a few more minutes to eat, right? First we have Dan Rudge, who's here. He is, there you go, thanks Dan. He is the Bryan College Station Metropolitan Planning Organization Executive Director. He has 25 years of experience in the transportation planning profession and has worked in 60 different states gaining that experience. While at the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Dan served as Chief Planning and Manager of Mobility Programs and was responsible for statewide and local transportation planning initiatives. Before that, he was the Executive Director of the Springfield, Missouri MPO, and his responsibilities included management oversight as well as project oversight. And he also worked at 3 other MPOs and has written multiple long-range transportation plans, congestion management, transit development, and transportation demand management plans. In addition to his MPO work, Dan was a research associate with the Center for Urban Transportation Research in Florida, and he holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the Virginia Commonwealth University and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Virginia Tech. So that's Dan Rudge. He will be speaking next, and then following Dan will be Michael Parks, who has been with the Brazos Valley Council of Government since 2002, and he's currently Executive Director. Prior to that, he served as Director of the Bryan College Station MPO for 6 years and for 9 years as a Staff Transportation Planner in Las Cruces, New Mexico. He's an Aggie twice over, and when I first read that, I was like, my heart kind of did a little, oh yay! And then it says he received his Bachelor of Planning and Master's of Public Education Administration from New Mexico State University, the NMSU Aggie. So it's those other Aggies over there, yeah. He works regionally in 7 counties that make up the Brazos Valley COG in the areas of workforce development, regional transportation planning, economic development, homeland security, housing, workforce, healthcare, broadband development, and other regional issues. Busy folks these guys are. His accomplishments include serving in several volunteer capacities, but also City of Bryan Planning and Zoning Commission, City of College Station Transportation Advisory Committee, and he's a certified planner with the American Planning Association. But he's most proud of the accomplishment of being a pre-K Sunday school teacher, a Little League board president and coach, and an assistant scoutmaster. He and his wife of 34 years, Annette, have 2 grown children, and they are Texas A&M Aggie graduates, Shauna and David. So yes, that's the other Aggie, the other Aggie that here that we know more about, we hear more about. So, Dan, when you are ready, come join us, and the clicker is all yours and the mic. How's that?
Slight technical issue, we can't get the slideshow. Oh, it's up there.
Oh.
That's weird.
Here, let's see.
There we go. Yep. All right.
Okay.
It was a trick. Is that? Yeah. So I'm sorry, when I do a presentation, I tend to pace. I pace because I find it's harder to hit a moving target. And a lot of times when I'm talking transportation, people want to throw things at me. So forgive me, but I'm going to hold the mic in my hand and I'm going to pace back and forth. The 2 things I wanted to talk to you about today are the Freeport to Fort Worth. I believe we've started to change the name to the Texas Triangle Parkway to make it easier for folks to understand what we're trying to do. I'll also talk a little bit about I-14 and I-214, so you can get an idea of some of the other freight corridors that are potentially radiating out of central Texas. So what we're trying to do is develop a third alternative for moving people and goods. We're trying to connect the Deepwater Port of Freeport to the Alliance Railyard in Fort Worth. And we're also trying to maximize existing corridors. That's a kind of a wordage that we got from the Texas Department of Transportation, which was, let's try to expand existing corridors as much as possible. And the reason for that is we're doing one project in Bryan College Station. It's exactly 12 miles. We're expanding it from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, and it currently has a price tag of $550 million. So you can imagine how much it would cost to build a new road. So we're, of course, looking to expand existing corridors. We're looking to connect areas of Texas that are currently underserved using the existing interstate freeway system. And we're finding that, according to the state demographer's office, that a lot of the growth that's occurring in the state of Texas is within and along the edges of the Texas Triangle. So the edges of the Texas Triangle, if you can imagine I-10, I-35, and I-45, they have interstates. The center of the Texas Triangle does not. So we're moving forward in that direction. So you're all aware of the Port of Freeport, the deepest deepwater port on the Gulf of Mexico, the one that will benefit the most from the Panama Canal work. And we're looking forward to working with the Port of Freeport to help them move their freight through to some of their markets. Now, the original study that I did, and I'm not going to make any excuses for anybody, but about 7 years ago when I first started this job, I was approached by the MPO director for the Houston MPO and the MPO director for the Waco MPO and said, we need to do a study between Freeport and the Alliance Railyard, which you're looking at right now, and figure out how we might be able to better move freight. I said, okay, I'm in. The director of the Houston MPO retired, and the director of the Waco MPO took a new job in Lexington, Kentucky, so I was left to do the study myself. This is the Alliance Railyard. You can see there are a number of rail lines that come here. What you cannot see in this picture, they also have their own airport. This is a big deal for distribution of goods throughout the United States. And we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if we connected the Port of Freeport to the Alliance Railyard to better help move freight through the state of Texas? So under the current state freight plan, as you can see, there are dashed lines everywhere, I-14, there's even one coming up 249. But you'll notice that the movement between the Port of Freeport and the Alliance Railyard is not really incorporated anywhere in the state freight plan. And so the purpose of our study was to say, let's do enough work where we can catch the attention of the Texas Department of Transportation and get them involved in trying to add some routes through the Texas Triangle. So the proposed alignment for Fort Worth to Cleburne was to use the existing facility, which is called the Chisholm Trail Parkway. From Cleburne to Waco, they wanted to extend the Chisholm Trail Parkway. From Waco to Bryan College Station, there's Loop 340 in Waco. From there to the Hearn Tower area, they would use existing Highway 6. The same thing with Bryan College Station, follow State Highway 6. And then from Bryan College Station to Hempstead, follow the State Highway 6 alignment. And then from Hempstead to the Gulf, create this new 36A corridor / Texas Triangle Parkway. So the Houston Galveston Area Council, their contribution was to tell us, good luck, you're working through one of the fastest growing parts of our region, and there are a lot of environmental concerns that you have to deal with. There was an identification in the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan that they needed to look at some existing corridor potentials from the Port of Freeport northward. And HGSA committed funding to the initial phase of the study. They've recently been doing a lot of work on the existing Route 36 corridor, which I'll explain to you in a minute why that is important for what we're doing. But that's a 52-mile corridor to get us north of Rosenberg. And then you have your 36A coalition group, which is trying to work on, I'm sorry, I changed the name, Texas Triangle Parkway, to get from Freeport all the way up to US 290. One of the things that has been very important to us is the last dot there that you see, the approved emergency evacuation. Every time there's an announcement that a hurricane is coming and they decide to rearrange Houston, a lot of the folks leave and come to Bryan College Station and fill up all of our hotels. So we want to make it available for you to be able to get there safely. So the issues that we face here is, as you can see, we have 36 and we have 6 and we have a big hole in the middle. And so we started looking at the Texas Triangle freight concerns, and we looked at a general area. You're all very familiar with this. And we identified a number of constraints through the Houston-Galveston Area Council of all of the things that we have to deal with. And we're dealing with a really tight corridor here. That's just the reality of the situation. That part of it is going to be the most difficult part. But what we wanted to do today was to highlight for you some of the things that are going on outside of the Houston region that is being supportive of what's going on with the 36A coalition. So in the TxDOT Bryan district, they have already completed improvements to State Highway 6 between Kern and OSR. It was at one time one of the highest crash corridors in the state of Texas. It no longer is because of the improvements they've made. They studied development of State Highway 6 as a 4-lane divided facility in certain portions of it, generally following the existing alignment. They've done a Hearn relief route study. If you've ever driven up State Highway 6, one of the issues you run into is you go right through the middle of Hearn, and when you're in Hearn, you also have an at-grade railroad crossing. And the freight firms have told us, well, we'd really like to use the State Highway 6 corridor, but we don't want to get stuck at that at-grade railroad crossing. And so the TxDOT Bryan district has looked at doing a Hearn bypass. We also identified that the city of Calvert also needs to be looked at, because again, you're going through the center of town. We don't have railroad tracks there, but it does slow the trucks down enough. So we've been in discussions with them to do that, even though it's outside of where my MPO is allowed to operate, because I think it's important for Bryan College Station and the connection to 36A that I need to be involved in the discussions with the Calvert bypass to make sure it meets everybody's needs. So moving back to this corridor, you'll see that one of the corridors that's in there is I-14. You'll see that there is a portion of State Highway 6, and one of the things that we've learned from the Texas Department of Transportation is that I-14 will be great for moving freight goods from the Port of Freeport west to the western United States. Using the Texas Triangle Parkway will be great for using the moving freight from the Port of Freeport to the Alliance Railyard. But I-14 really doesn't work really well to get folks from the Port of Freeport back to I-45. So, does this thing have a lane? Oh. Yep, sorry. So I will quit trying to find the laser pointer here. But basically, basically, when we get back to the map, we're looking at trying to find a corridor that would connect State Highway 6 to I-45, somewhere in the vicinity of Corsicana, where it's already been expanded to a 6-lane facility. Now, Mike is going to talk about what kind of problems that causes for working with some of the jurisdictions that are out there, and I'm hoping he's going to use some of our fun planning acronyms. If not, we'll use them later. So, as we're waiting on the...
That was a joke, man.
Okay, so these two antennas fell in love and got married. The wedding ceremony was awful, but the reception was awesome.
Y'all set that up.
So anyway, getting back to where I was, we're looking to try to create a route that would get us from State Highway 6 up to Corsicana along I-45. We did a study back in 2016 that looked at the I-45 corridor. It was done by my friends at Texas A&M Transportation Institute, and Curtis Morgan, who is with Texas A&M Transportation Institute, also helped me with the freight study that I did for Port Freeport all the way up to the Alliance Railyard. But from his study, I-45 had more bottlenecks than any other highway in the country. So that's problem one. Kind of sounds like we need an alternative, doesn't it? The Houston region and north to Conroe is experienced level of service F, which if you don't know what that means, stop and go traffic, mostly stopped. Okay? Now, in some cases it's okay. We have a joke in Bryan College Station that we have a street called University Drive. It's level of service F, and they're developing all these high-rises along University Drive for student housing, and people are complaining, well, what about University Drive? And we're like, well, it's already level of service F. Can it get any F-ier? The number of freight tonnage is expected to increase by 89% in the I-45 corridor by 2040, and truck freight is expected to more than double, to increase by about 130% from 82 million tons to 192 million tons. How do we get all of that freight up I-45? We can't. We have to look at alternatives. So right now, the average travel time on I-45, if you're lucky, is 4 hours and 48 minutes from Freeport to the Alliance Railroad. On average, the existing travel time using Route 36, State Highway 6, and I-35 is 5 hours and 10 minutes. So a little bit faster going I-45 at this point in time. However, there's a 25% chance that you will reach a bottleneck somewhere on I-45 every time you use it. Whereas on the 36 State Highway 6 I-35 corridor, it's only a 7% chance. And that 7% are those railroad tracks in Hearn. They make up all but 2% of that potential delay. By 2030, which is only 7 years away, they anticipate that the total travel time on Interstate 45 will be 6 hours and 35 minutes. But on State Highway 6, 5 hours and 37 minutes, if there are no improvements. So if we make the improvements, we now have a high-speed freight corridor that moves freight where they want it to go. We also have in our area an interesting situation, and that this piece of property that you're looking at is completely owned by the Union Pacific Railroad. 6 of their 7 lines come directly into this yard. Now, when I started here 7 years ago, they bought the property and said, we're gonna put in a rail classification yard, which is basically they bring trains in, they take them apart, they put them back together and send them on their way. However, because
I-14 is now actually advancing somewhere. They pulled back on that. And we suspect that what they're really interested in doing is creating an intermodal facility like what we have at the Alliance Railyard in Fort Worth. So there's Brazos Yard in their general context. You can see one of the lines doesn't quite make it all the way there. But we've been talking to Union Pacific, and unfortunately, playing their cards close to the vest is being very liberal with our discussions with them. There is one line that scares us completely, which is the Navasota sub, and if I can go back, yes. The Navasota sub is the one that goes through Mumford straight down to Houston. So the reason that scares us is because that runs right along Welburn Road in Bryant and College Station. It's currently being double tracked. We have a project at the Bush-Welburn intersection, which will become an interchange. They've asked us to triple track it. So that would bring more freight from Freeport, and because the trains are about the maximum length they can get, it wouldn't be how many more cars can they add to a train, but how many more trains can they put together to bring up that line. And so for us, we've been looking at things like an inland port, an international trade free zone, any other economic benefits that we can deal with. But on my side, what kind of transportation network changes are necessary to improve access to that yard? If the Navasota sub increases significantly, what do we do with the 14 at-grade rail crossings we have in Bryan College Station? Another big question. And does I-14 get rerouted to serve Brazos Yard? Which segues nicely into my I-14 talk. So quickly, I-14 was originally included in the Fixing America's Surface Transportation for FAST Act in 2015. It said in that law it will generally follow the US 190 corridor in Texas. And for those of you that don't know the interstate system, it's a 1 because it's between I-10 and I-20, and it's a 4 because it has an east-west route. So if you look at it, 45, obviously 4 means it runs north-south, and 5, it's weird. But anyway, you can do that. It was named after the 14th Amendment officially, and I changed the slide the other day. It's still unofficially called the Ports Corridor, and it used to say it connects Fort Bliss to Fort Hood to Fort Polk. They recently changed the name, so now it connects those forts, now called Cavazos and Johnson. The first segment opened in April of 2017, and that's what it looks like. It's right around the old Fort Hood. And then, when the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act came out in 2021, it extended I-14 west all the way out to San Angelo and Midland, Odessa. It included 4 new spurs to connect the ports at Corpus Christi, Houston, Beaumont, and Port Arthur. We actually got language in the law that says there will be a loop around Bryan College Station, and it will be designated as I-214. So we got that in the language. And then the route was extended through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. It's a very important hurricane route. As I mentioned earlier, it only takes one hurricane to come in and rearrange a neighborhood, and then I-10 doesn't work. So again, another important hurricane corridor. And the interesting part of that story is that this change to I-14 was called the Cruz-Warnock Amendment. So it's sponsored by Ted Cruz and Senator Warnock. If you know your politics, one's slightly to the right and one's slightly farther to the left in this plot. So this is what the new alignment looks like. The original alignment is shown in red. The additions are shown in blue, but it's still connecting a lot of different ports and forts and Air Force bases all the way through to the east side. Now, in Bryan College Station, we adopted a major thoroughfare concept. We did this back in 2016 when I first started, and we had a series of 12 public meetings. We had over 7,000 people show up. We got 5,000 written comments, at least that many verbal comments. My name was taken in vain at least 2,000 times. And the whip marks are just now healing on my back. But we did get it adopted. And what I'm showing you here is that that dashed blue line represents both I-14 and I-214. And the thinking behind it at the time was that if I-14 ever becomes a reality, we would like to be able to allow the freight traffic, if they want to be able to divert away from Bryan College Station and not get caught up in our traffic bottlenecks. Now, luckily for us, we just got money to expand State Highway 6 from 4 to 6 lanes, so that may be less of a point than it was before, but it's still an option, and freight operators like options. Michael likes to joke that the freight folks take I-45 unless they open up the way stations on I-45, and then they take State Highway 6. So, sorry to steal your joke, Michael. So the I-14 Texas corridor study kicked off this month. It's examining the extension of I-14 to Huntsville. They're determining also the preferred route for I-14. The total time for that project will be 7 years to complete. And that's the process. I made that impossibly small at the request of the Texas Department of Transportation so that you couldn't see all the steps that they have to go through and why it takes them 7 years. So next steps for us is we have a 2 to 3 years for identifying and prioritizing segments. Then we get into schematic design and environmental clearance, which is another 3 to 4 years. Construction planning development in 1 to 10 years, and then construction can begin in about 10 more years. So only 20 years to go. Every time I put this slide up, I get everybody in the audience at Bryan College Station go, I hope to drive on that before I die. So the next steps are the long-term commitments and the working with other regional partners, and I turn it over to Michael.
I'm not good at telling jokes like Dan is, and I was hoping to have like a dad joke for you, but you know I didn't know what constitutes a dad joke, and I thinking, and then I realized a dad joke is you know it is when it becomes apparent. So, as a council of governments guy, I spent my early career in transportation planning, and I love it because it's easy. I tell everybody it's hard, but I'm among friends here, and the work is fulfilling and gratifying. The problem is it takes forever. My first job, right out of college, I did a thoroughfare plan like Dan did at Las Cruces, New Mexico. I got a job 8 years later in Texas, and I moved. When I was moving, they were just breaking ground on the very first streets that we planned 8 years earlier. And I learned a good lesson at that point. He said, I'm gonna be a transportation planner, but I must be a great gardener. Because I can see the fruits of my effort at the end of the gardening season, whereas the fruits of my efforts for planning takes decades. And so one of the things that we try to do though is we try to keep this conversation of transportation alive and fresh in our neck of the woods for our Brazos Valley Council of Governments area. I'm surrounded by other councils of government. And if you're not familiar with COGs or regional planning commissions, HGAC is the COG for this area here. But there's 24 of us in the state. And each of us think we're the center of the universe. That's just the way it works. In fact, I got a question for you. If you can answer the right way, I've got a challenge point for you. Making it interesting. What decade were most of the COGs created in Texas? First one that raised their hand knows the answer gets the challenge point. When were most COGs created, sir?
HKC just celebrated its 55th birthday last year.
So what decade were they created?
Back in the 70s. Well, in the 60s.
I'll give you the 60s, because it was the 60s. We're about 50 years old, all of us, and we've been doing this for quite a while. So, we're not new to the planning game, but it is important that we keep this conversation alive. I first spoke at this organization probably Richard, where's Richard at? You first invited me to come speak a long time ago, but it takes a long time to get things done. And I think by us coming down, us meaning Dan and I coming to visit with y'all here, we know we're in a territory where we're talking about 36A Texas Triangle Parkway. But what I'm suggesting is it doesn't stop there, that our need for good transportation in the Aggie Land area augments the need to have it right here close to home. And so working together, we build these coalitions. Our Council of Government actually passed a resolution in support of 36A those many years ago because they realized that all of that was going to be feeding Highway 6. It was to our advantage to support good transportation, even though it was outside of our region. And that was a big step for us because usually, like I said, COGS and communities think the universe revolves around them and only them. Dare I say and bring up at the risk of my own peril, high-speed rail. Am I among friends? So, you know, we supported high-speed rail for decades prior to when we did it. And we did it because of perception that infrastructure would not benefit anybody in between Dallas and Houston. That's the perception. Perception is reality. Now, put that thought process to Texas Triangle Parkway or the 36A or any of the other corridors that are going to bisect the Texas Triangle. And so, one of the things that I hope to share, and as we go forward here, is that we're not just by ourselves. This is a map of all the COGS in the state of Texas. You can see HGAC. I don't think you found a laser pointer, did you? Okay, so I'm gonna do old-fashioned way. Purple 16, that is HGAC. Okay, just north of there, 13 planning, and these are called planning regions by the governor's office, Mr. Russo. You know all about these. So, 13 is where I live. That's Aggie Land. Then on top of us there, to the north, is the heart of Texas, number 11, HOCOG. And then above them is the North Central Texas Council of Governments, NCTCOG. All of those folks in between, again, the sun rises and sets on their universe. And we have to bring them into this conversation. I've already begun, and together with some of y'all, we've started talking to folks in Waco to let them know, hey, don't be surprised if you start seeing lines on maps or corridors talked about. Please don't misunderstand. We want your participation. We want your help. We're not trying to bowl you over. This is generally the path that a such corridor might take. I say might. Nothing's been decided. I think that's the way we have to approach it. But even once you get past these councils of government, guess what? You see all the little squares and zigzagging lines and shapes? Those are all counties. The same is said for counties. The sun rises and sets on that county commission. Every one of those counties has to be discussed and have to be presented with why this is good for them. Otherwise, we're going to create our own opposition as we go. Heard NIMBYs, not in my backyard. NIM2, not in my term of office. The list goes on and on, right? But I'm doing my part to share with my compadres in Central Texas that this is good for Texas. It's good for us. And we need to not be so afraid of conversations with Houston and conversations with Dallas, that this is bigger than all of us. And if we can keep it closely aligned with existing rights of way, we'll have a better shot. If we start going through greenfields, look out. It's game on at that point. So I hope to just, again, I'm not talking long here. You guys, most of you know this anyway, but it's important and imperative that we include all of these folks along the way. And Dan's done a great job at reaching out to the MPO directors in that area. I'm doing my part to talk to my councils of governments folks, and then I'm leaving it to them to talk to their folks, because we want everybody's opinion to be heard. I personally espouse that if you are on a trade route, you have the opportunity to prosper. And that's what I hope to sell to the folks in my neighborhood, is that we want to prosper. Growth is coming, whether we like it or not, it's coming. It's here, in fact, in most places. We can either prosper by it, or we can stick our head in the sand and get run over by it. So, we're doing our part up north. We hope you guys down south can continue to get it done, and we're gonna support you every bit of the way as much as we can. But working together, I think we'll have a better chance to get the whole thing finished. So, I'll open it up for questions, and Dan knows all the answers. And a few more jokes, by the way. So, question right here, David.
So, in a previous Highway 36A coalition meeting, they talked about moving.
Things. And there seemed to be more on the side of 36A coming up Highway 6 than to follow the traditional Highway 36. Because eventually 36 meanders too far to the west when we were trying to get to 6 and then go back towards the DFW area. So we'll still talk about it even today, but I think if we landed on something, it would be on the Highway 6 side.
I guess the only comment I would make, one of your maps showed the old 36 thing with National Park, 290, make that go away. So we'll get you.
New maps would be good.
New maps would be great, thank you.
My assistant, Dave Burnett.
Thank you very much, guys. Great question and answer time, and appreciate it. Just y'all sit up here if you will, but.